Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Paranormal Insight. My name is Tim Sedano. I'm your host, and with me today is Dr. Barbara Stone, and she wrote a fantastic book, one of a few, Star Civilizations 101. And I heard about this from our other guest, Charlene Clossy, and I was so interested in every because I just read the little foreword that comes in the Amazon thing, and I was intrigued and fascinated, and I couldn't wait to talk to her. So, without further ado, Dr. Barbara Stone, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Tim. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, as we start out in your book, you have an introduction, and I will be completely upfront with you. I'm more or less coming into this blank, only having read the foreword. I'm sorry, not the foreword, but the description, and maybe the first half of the first chapter. So I have some of the basics down, and I've heard other experts talk on this subject. But can you break the book down in like a couple of sentences or a paragraph?
Sure. We truly are not alone in the universe. There have been a lot of different star civilizations that have impacted our species. So I do an introduction to about 20 of those different star races. Now, some of them are detrimental, some are helpful, and some are neutral. Now, one reason we should look at ETs is because extraterrestrials genetically engineered our species. We are a combination of 24 different royal star races, which makes us really special. It's like the cream of the crop from 24 different races. But we have been interfered with. Excuse me. Many readers might have heard of the Anunnaki story. Have you ever heard of
Oh,
Enki and Enlil?
of course, yes.
Yeah,
Zachariah Stitchin dove into that pretty heavily.
yes. Sitchin's books are a good introduction to the war between the two brothers and the war between Enki, who loved the humans, was a part of the genetic engineering of the humans, and Enlil, who never liked us. And there's a special chapter on the Anunnaki in the book, which boils down to a very radical thought. May I say something extremely radical here?
Of course, that's what we're here for.
Okay. Well, let me preface it by saying I grew up in the Bible Belt and we read the Bible and we got points for reading the whole Bible. So as a teenager, I asked my mother, why was God so mean in the Old Testament?
Mhm.
Because Yahweh would get angry. Like when one of his people married a Midianite, he got so angry, he not only killed that couple, but he killed thousands of his own people. And when he ordered King David to go march against some enemies, and David counted his soldiers to just see, do we have enough? Yahweh got so angry at David for not just taking orders and do it and checking to see if he had the resources to do it, that he killed over 100,000 of his own people.
Yeah. Wow.
Now, does this sound like a God of love? And over, Yahweh would get angry and lash out. And there was a big message in the Old Testament: obey or die.
Hmm.
Don't think for yourself. Just do what you're told. Now, that program does not sound like unconditional love to me. Well, my mother explained it when I asked her. She said, well, God wasn't a Christian yet.
That's a fantastic way to look at it. Uh,
Well,
yeah,
yeah,
the Old Testament was full of the wrathful God.
yes,
Absolutely, yeah.
yes. So, what a lot of people are saying is that that wrathful God was actually Enlil.
Okay.
He was the one. He came in a chariot of fire. It was smoky and it made noise, and he had to have a big tent, and they had to bring him food. That he had a group of people loyal to him, the Israelites. And that is very shocking, not just to the Jewish people, that Enlil usurped the place of the one true creator of all. And he said, I created everything. Well, the Anunnaki may have genetically engineered us, but they didn't create themselves, and they just tinkered with the genes. And 95% of our DNA is not activated. They didn't give us the lifespans of hundreds of thousands of years that they had with their perfect DNA. They didn't give that to us.
If I may pause you right there on a certain
Yes.
point, there was, if I remember correctly, it's been a long time since I was a Catholic. Not, I still am a Catholic, but it's been a long time since I studied. But if I recall correctly, like the folks like Noah and before him were living hundreds of
Yep.
years.
They lived
Interesting.
up to 1,000 years, right? And after the flood, they cut the lifespan down to 120. That's what we're supposed to do. 3 cycles of 40 years. Most
Mm.
of us only make 2 cycles of 40 years, die around 80. But there's something very fishy about the Old Testament God. And in church, I was brought up to believe that was God, worship him, sing praises to the God, that God really wants our worship and our praise. So as our human race is getting ready to ascend, we are leaving behind that do as you're told, worship the God, pray like this with your head down,
Hmm.
and instead open up to your direct connection with source of an all-loving God, and like pray like this.
Yeah, you
Oh,
probably like
great
right. You
creator,
probably
you did a
yeah.
good job.
Hands up.
Yeah. So the old way is like a reptilian force, a regressive force limiting human creativity. And some of the star races that are our cousins, our brothers and sisters who have already stepped out of their reptilian programming have been helping us. And namely the Pleiadians, the Syrians, Andromedans, and Arcturians. They are already more evolved than we are, and they're extending to us a helping hand.
The races you just named, those are our names for them, right? They have their
Yes,
own language and
yes.
names for themselves. Do we happen to know what those are? What
Well,
those
I haven't.
actual names are? Just
Um,
curious.
I'll tell you one of them. The Arcturians, we call them Arcturians. Elena Denon, which is in direct connection with many of these races, says there are 3 groups of Arcturians, and the ones that are helping us are called the Ohori.
Ohori.
Ohori, the Ohori.
Oh,
So I have a chapter on each of these races to kind of give more information on who they are, what they're about.
okay.
And I start out with the whales and dolphins because, you know, a whale doesn't look anything like us, but they are mammals. They
Yeah.
breathe, and they have been here on our planet for 500,000 years, longer than humans, longer than the other ET races. And their songs carry the history of our Earth. I had the pleasure of being able to swim in the wild with humpback whales.
Oh, fun.
And I had an experience that just really changed my life. It's something I want to share with everybody. I was in the water, we were watching a baby whale, and her mama was in the water, and I was with a group of half a dozen or a dozen people on a ship through an organization called Aquatic Adventures. You can find them online, aquaticadventures.com, where
Is
you
that
go
on the
out.
east? Is that on the East Coast or West Coast?
It's north of the Dominican Republic in
Okay.
a place, yeah. It's a place where there's a coral reef. It's called the Silver Banks, and the whales go there to mate and to calve, to have their babies.
Gotcha.
And each mother whale only watches her whale. They don't do any collective babysitting. So it's a hard job 24/7 trying to keep track of a youngster. So when we snorkelers find a mama in a whale, a mama that will let us watch her baby, she can kind of take a nap while the baby comes up to look at us. Ooh, you're so funny looking. I mean, we've got long flipper feet and different colors and masks and things. And they are very interactive. And while we were watching the baby, we named her Pearl. At one point I was watching the mother, and I just sent her a beam of love, and she sent me a beam of energy that just burst a bubble of limitation that I had around myself.
Interesting.
It was like I was a goldfish in a bowl, and all of a sudden the bowl popped and I had the whole ocean there. And she sent me a message, a telepathic message: be all you can be. Now that's for all of us, Tim, you and me and everybody listening, for the whole planet. And
I,
what I noticed about that was that before I had that limitation around me, whatever I was doing, there was a voice that said I should be doing something else. If I'm weeding the garden, the voice said you should be answering your email. And if I'm answering my email, it said you should be weeding the garden. You couldn't win. Whatever it is, it criticizes what you do.
Gotcha. The self-criticizer, yes.
Yes. And when she did that, that went away. And now I weed the garden, and I love being out there in the garden, and I answer my email, and I love talking to people through email. And it's not that constant criticizing myself, which is one way that we keep ourselves small. We have to make ourselves larger. And I'm going to talk,
Spiritually, correct?
yes,
Okay.
yes, we have to realize that we were created with practically unlimited creative potential. That's something very special about the human race. Like the Greys, they're not creative. They can't think up new things like we do.
Interesting.
And yeah, okay.
Um,
So
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was going to ask if you have seen, and I think it's largely faked, but they still bring up some interesting philosophical points. There's an interview with a great alien back when Project Blue Book was still a thing, and it somehow leaked onto the internet. And there's like four parts to it. And my reasoning for thinking it's faked is because there's a overlap with the voice distortion. And the guy and the little alien guy talks, but whoever created this, if it is indeed created, I could be wrong. Um, Still posited some very interesting philosophical points. And one of the points is something you just touched on, that the Grays, this particular Gray, what he said was, he says, oh, he's asked, where are you from? He said, I'm from Earth. I'm just like from way in the future, and this is why I look this way, because we evolved to this. Do you think that holds any weight? I mean, even if this video was faked, I've seen other articles like in Omni back when that was still around. They actually projected the human evolution to look something close to a gray. But go ahead. I'm pleasing if you could touch on
I'll
that.
just tell you my opinion
Sure.
that the Greys will use any excuse they can to try to insinuate themselves into our species.
Okay.
And Elena Denon agrees with this point of view that that is a fallacy.
Okay.
However, it is something the Greys have wanted. Now, the Greys, there's a big chapter on the Greys in my book. I'll give you a sketch outline of what's going on with them. A long time ago, they decided their problem was they had too many feelings. Have you ever
Okay.
heard of something like
Well,
that?
that's in line with the Vulcans from Star Trek. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. So they strip their emotional body. They have no feelings. They can think, and they're very highly developed in thinking, but they don't have feelings.
Okay.
Well, their heads got so big, the gray females couldn't get the babies through the birth canal.
Wow.
They lost the ability to reproduce sexually. So they have been reproducing by cloning themselves. When the body wears out, they make a clone and then transfer the memories and the consciousness into the clone.
That's
And then
interesting you
when that
mentioned
one
that.
wears out, and you have a clone of a clone,
Right.
as if you had a copy of a copy of a copy. And
Cool.
after a while, some defects come in that. So one of the reasons they want to hybridize, and their whole thing is they want to hybridize with humans, make a gray human hybrid
Okay.
for two reasons. So they don't become extinct, but also they would like to live on our planet and they can't breathe the air or eat the food. So if they have a hybrid with the human, they'll be able to live in our atmosphere and
Okay.
eat our food. So now, how are they going to get the humans to agree to hybridize with them? These big heads, big eyes, almost no chin, skinny bodies. In the 1950s, a group of reptilians, and the reptilians and the grays work together. Grays are sort of like foot soldiers for the reptilians,
Are they a
and
separate species or were they a developed species or
it may be that the reptilians genetically engineered the grays to do some of their work. Some
okay.
of the gray species, the little short grays, they're all androids. It's the
Oh, I've heard
taller
that.
grays.
I've heard that. Okay, so you talk about the
Yeah,
taller ones that are closer to 5 or 6 foot.
yeah.
Okay.
Extremely telepathic. They can just look at you and know all your thoughts. And the people who've been abducted say they could read their minds just by looking at them. So the it's quite a story. In the 50s, a group of Nordics, these are tall Scandinavian looking people who live in the inner earth, came to President Eisenhower and they gave him a warning. They said, there's a ship circling around the equator and they're bad dudes. Don't make any treaties with them. You can't trust them.
Right.
And the Nordics said to Eisenhower, we will make a deal with you. We will help you advance spiritually and learn how to treasure your planet, but you have to agree to give up your nuclear weapons because they cause way too much destruction, not just on Earth.
Let me pause you and interject something really quick. For those of you out there who don't know, this is that missing week in Eisenhower's history during his presidency, where they said he had some dental work done. I'm sorry, please continue.
Yeah. Well, Eisenhower probably liked that idea, but the heads of state in MJ-12, which was a group of majestic 12 people, mostly in the military, who were in charge of the ET question,
Hmm.
formed after Roswell, when that was a real ET ship, and they got a live ET,
Oh
and
yeah.
they didn't want the public to know about that, and they had financial reasons for that. One big reason is that the ETs have free energy, and most of the wealthy people were into oil, and if you run
Yeah.
your car on free energy instead of oil that you have to buy, that would be
Yeah.
endangering the security of their wallets.
Yes. Isn't that terrible? We lost out on all
Yes.
that enlightenment over money. I
Well,
mean,
that was one reason. Yeah.
but
Okay.
go ahead.
Okay. So then the ones in the ship orbiting the equator came. They were a long-nosed reptilian race. They said, we're from a planet named Betelgeuse and our planet's dying and we need some help. And we would like to do some experiments on humans and cows, and we
Hmm.
won't hurt them. Well, they didn't say they wouldn't hurt the cows because they take all their blood. They're not much
Their
good
lips, their
without their
eyes, all that stuff.
yeah,
Yeah, good.
organs and study them because cow blood can be used in humans in an emergency for a transfusion. It's close enough. How about that?
That's intriguing.
Yeah. So they
Isn't
said,
pigs also, aren't pigs also compatible?
yeah, you can use a pig heart or pig heart
Oh,
valve.
I'm thinking organs. You're right. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Um, so they said, we just want to study some humans. We won't hurt them. And in exchange, we'll give you secrets of technology. Well, the military went for that deal.
Of course.
And they said, we'll give you a list of who we abduct. And then, of course, they gave us technology, but it was kind of their old junk. They had the much advanced stuff, their old things. We didn't get as much as we thought.
Right.
And they took far more than they said, and they would do experiments on them without anesthesia, harvest eggs and sperm,
Mm.
terrifying these people. And then they do a memory wipe with a magnet. They would put a magnet over them so that they didn't have the memory, and they thought that it wouldn't hurt them if they couldn't remember what happened. But
Okay.
we humans store emotions in the cells of our bodies, and their bodies knew they were traumatized. They didn't know why.
Right.
Then there was another thing that happened in 1952. There was a flyover of Washington, D.C.
Oh,
by
sure.
Hubble spaceships.
Right, right. That was famous. That was in the news even.
Yes,
And
yes.
it was
And
inversions from swamp gas or something like that. Wasn't that when that excuse
that
came
was
down?
the excuse.
Yeah.
But it was that there was a breakaway from Nazis in World War II. They went to Antarctica and they
Mhm.
were working with the reptilians. The reptilians made a deal with the Nazis. They said, we'll give you a spacecraft, you can reverse engineer it, and we'll give you 1 million cloned soldiers, very expendable, right?
Wow.
And you win World War II, and Hitler would be the king of the world, and he would be the mouthpiece for the reptilians to bring in their new world order that they want.
Wow.
Well,
That's insane.
yeah. So they didn't win the land war. So they went to Antarctica. And we, after World War II, we sent down Admiral Byrd with Operation High Jump
Yeah.
to clean out the Nazis down there, but instead, their advanced spacecraft came up out of the water, shot our planes, just
Mm.
demolished them, and they had to turn hightail and come home because they had extremely advanced technology. With the flyover, that was their letting our government know we've got much more destructive power than you. So when they came to make this treaty with Eisenhower, it's sort of like, well, we'll bomb your country to smithereens unless you sign this agreement.
Wow.
And in the interest of, I mean, I can see in a way why they agreed to it because they were dealing with a power that was much more advanced than them. Now,
Gotcha.
the Nordics have been at war with the reptilians forever. And World War II was really a struggle between the Nordics and the reptilians. The Nordics came over to our side when they saw what Hitler was doing with the advanced technology, that he was using it for war.
Mhm.
So here are these grays trying to make hybrids.
Okay.
So they,
Mhm.
I mean, it's almost ludicrous, Tim. They abduct a female, they impregnate her with some alien sperm, send her back home. When the fetus is 3 or 4 months old, they abduct her again, take out the fetus, put it in a tank of liquid nutrients. And then when the fetus is full term, they take it out. Well, babies need love.
Especially if they're half human.
Yeah, the human half of them need love,
Right.
and they don't have any love. So
Because they kill their
sometimes,
emotions.
yeah, they strip their emotions. They don't know how to love. Love, what's that?
Yeah, gotcha.
So one of the things they've been doing is abducting the mothers of these hybrids to hold their children and love them. But there's also a secret agenda that it means humans are connected to these hybrids because they're half their children.
Right.
And it's a way to welcome ET human hybrids into our society.
That's emotional blackmail. Is what it is. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And that is not really a good idea.
Doesn't sound like it. No. I
No.
would tend to agree with that.
Yeah.
This is not the first time I've heard this story. I've heard numerous abductee tales that speak exactly to what you just said. Read about them, watched them on TV, what have you. So hearing this is not unfamiliar to me.
Mhm.
Maybe to some of our listeners and viewers, but not to me. It's staggering that level of, gosh, manipulation, I guess is the word I'm looking for.
Yes. Yes. And now here's the good news.
Good news.
Are you ready for good news?
I'm ready
Yes.
for good news.
Okay. I'm going to talk about Alex Collier. Have you heard of him?
I've heard of Alex Collier, yes.
Oh, he's a giant in the ET field. When he was 8 years old, he was first abducted while his family was on a picnic, and he disappeared for many hours. And then he reappeared. Yeah, he got in trouble for that. They thought he just ran off, but he was taken up on an Andromedan ship. He was selected for communication from two Andromedans named Visayas and Morni. And they told him through repeated interactions over his lifespan that they're an advanced civilization, and they looked into a device called, you might call it the looking glass, where they could see the future. And in the future, they saw that the whole Milky Way galaxy had been taken over by regressives.
Regressives.
Yeah, basically
Oh,
reptilians.
the reptilian guys. Okay.
The reptilian kingdom. They are billions of years older than us. They're extremely advanced. They can shapeshift.
Hmm.
They can change dimensions. They can hide between the dimensions. I mean, they know how to do a lot of technological stuff that we don't know how to do.
Yet.
And so they traced it back,
Good.
back to see where did this start
Okay.
in the whole galaxy. Surprise, it started on Earth, the
Hmm.
moon, and Mars.
Okay.
So the Galactic Federation got together and they said, look, this is going to be bad for everyone if this is allowed to come to pass.
Okay.
We have to help the people on Earth so that this doesn't happen. So the Pleiadians came, and in 2021, they started on the moon and they evicted the reptilians from the moon.
Wow.
One story I heard was when our astronauts arrived on the moon, around the crater were reptilian ships and reptilians going like this.
They knew that signal? That's kind of funny.
They did. And the message was, we don't want you here. You can take a few rocks, but after a while, you can't come back.
Wow. And there was a
So,
lot of secret, and you can, someone pointed out, I think it was Jeremy Corbell recently pointed out, um, how when they first were leaving, the astronauts were so joyful, and when they came back, they were almost morose and kind of depressed. Yeah. and it's almost
Yes.
scared looking. So it kind of speaks to what you
Yeah.
just mentioned. And it's not the first time I've heard that story. I worked at NASA, by the way,
Mm,
for a couple of years,
okay.
so certain things get around.
Yeah. There were other species there, and they couldn't talk about it. They were forbidden to
Yep.
talk about it. They cleaned out all the reptilians from the moon. Then they went to Mars, and the Pleiadians, we know this from Elena Danan's contact with her, the head of the Pleiadian fleet, whose
Mm.
name is Thorhan Iridian. And Elena was abducted as a child by Greys, and they were trying to put an egg sac in her to grow a reptilian. Ugh. Oh,
Oh, wow.
yeah, that was really bad. Well, Thorhan found her, rescued her, killed the Greys that were trying to do that, and they had implanted her in the center of her brain with a tracking device, and they couldn't take it out without killing her, but they adjusted the frequency so she has, like, through her chip, radio contact with Thorhan. She can read his thoughts and he can read hers.
That's
They have
cool.
a direct communication. So
Neat.
what the
Can I get one?
Pleiadians
No, I'm kidding. Sorry, go ahead.
what the Pleiadians did on Mars was there was an indigenous reptiloid race that grew on Mars, not bad, but they hated the Draco reptilians that came. And I mean, this sounds so strange, but in the 1930s, the Nazis already had a base on Mars. And
Really?
yeah, and then they developed in the 50s and 60s, or sometime after that, they have underground factories where they make advanced technology run by slave labor of humans.
On
And
Mars?
yeah, on Mars.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they told the humans that Earth blew up and they were just lucky to have, shelter and be alive. And so they went to Mars and they would blow up a reptilian ship and then radio headquarters for the reptilians and say, "Do you see what we just did?" Because they cloaked and then uncloaked, blow up the ship, cloak again.
Wow.
"Do you see what we just did? You can leave or we'll keep blowing up your ships."
And this
And
the local reptilians said this?
no, the
Okay.
Pleiadians
Oh,
said
the
this.
Pleiadians said that. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. They armed the local reptiloids to help them get rid of their oppressors.
Okay.
And they cleaned out Mars. So
What
they're
year was
working
this?
on this was, I believe, in 2021,
Oh, this is all 2021. Okay.
very recently. Yeah.
Okay.
And they are now working on Earth. Earth is a bigger challenge because there are a
Excuse
lot of reptilians that have been in underground tunnels. That's where they live. And the theory is that they were here long before humans were on the planet.
I was going to
And,
touch on that.
mhm.
It's actually shown up in television in like the last 20 years as perhaps part of an indoctrination system. I couldn't really speak to that, but it showed up on Star Trek Voyager, where they discover a race, a dinosaur race, related to dinosaurs from 60 million years ago. And they do a DNA track. It's like, oh my gosh, they're from Earth. We're
Yes.
cousins in a sense. So is that the story then that these reptilians left Earth when they developed a technology of their own and then they came back and they want Earth again? Is that what's happening, or am I
Well,
reading into it?
the reptilians come from the Orion star system,
Okay.
and they started long ago when humans were first made. We were seated in the Lyra constellation,
Oh,
and they put us on, different places to see how we'd grow. And the reptilians in the belt of Orion, because they are in service to self, there's a thing called law of one in the universe. You're either in service to self or in service to others.
Oh,
And the
okay.
reptilians are service to self.
Okay.
So just like in Star Wars, they armed themselves, they got troops, robots, missiles, they blew up a planet, and they went around invading other planets, taking their natural resources and enslaving the people or killing them. And they will work, here's their scheme. They go to a planet and they send the grays, and these little guys say, oh, poor us, we're a dying species, we need some genetic samples for study, and then can we please, live here? And then their bosses, the reptilians, come. So they've been underground for a long time, and I'm going to say something that's truly horrible.
Okay.
Both the reptilians and some species of the greys eat human flesh.
It's not the first time I've heard that, and that is terrible, by the way, and a little frightening.
Yeah, yeah, they eat us. I mean, we look delicious to them when we came along. Oh, yummy humans.
More hominids to eat. Okay.
Yes,
Wow.
yes. So that's one reason
Wait,
we are so
do
glad.
we know if they've actually attacked other hominid planets?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah, they
Okay.
have gone everywhere they can and done that. Well, in Lyra, there was a war between the Lyrans and the reptilians, and the reptilians were coming to Lyra to really take over everything with their superior technology. So the Lyrans had to scoot, and they took what ships they had, and then they took some asteroids and hollowed them out and made them ships, and they were just running for their lives. That's how human life got seeded in so many different places in our galaxy.
Oh, wow. Thank you for watching and listening. Please click the subscribe button and activate notifications for future episodes and other content. If you have a paranormal experience that you would like to discuss on the show, please email us at paranormal.insight.podcast@gmail.com. That's paranormal.insight.podcast@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook and Instagram under @paranormal_insight.